So welcome to Hero Talk, the quarantine edition, where we speak to ordinary people doing extraordinary things, heroes of culture, technology, philanthropy, and society who all have one thing in common. They want to change the world. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, one of my brothers in arms, dear friend of mine, accomplished author, public speaker, orator, expert in diversity and inclusion, and one of the best life coaches out there in the game right now. My friend, colleague, True Pettigrew. How are you, sir?
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. I appreciate that introduction, man. I feel special.
Oh man, you should,
special,
man.
brother.
You're a special brother. And, today I want to talk to you a little bit about something that I know that you have a significant amount of expertise in, an area that you spent a lot of time researching. You actually authored a book called Millennials Revealed that was published a few years ago, became, very well known as kind of a manifesto or a manual that everybody who's trying to understand, decode, decipher, everything about this kind of enigmatic generation needs to have. You've developed that playbook. And
Right.
Today I want to talk a little bit about the state of millennials in America in the wake of this kind of COVID-19 pandemic. They've obviously been a hot topic in the news. This is the second recession that they've experienced in almost a decade. They graduated, the majority of them have graduated into the housing crisis recession. And just when they're starting to kind of hack their way through and find some stable ground, obviously this pandemic hits, another kind of economic cratering. It's resulting in statistics that are just mind-blowing, and when you think about this audience overall in terms of the amount of college debt, they have, the fact that they have been adverse to accumulating any type of equitable assets, very little savings. I read a study that 62% of millennials in America are living paycheck to paycheck. And we know this is the first generation that is going to, in history, that's going to be economically worse off than their parents' generation. So my question to you is, man, are millennials screwed? And is there any way out of this for them? Not to put it bluntly and to just, get into it, like, are they screwed, and is there a path out of this for them in the short term?
Man, on the surface, you would think that's the case, right? That everything that you just expressed from a financial standpoint, it looks real bleak for this generation. And if you look at, again, some more data where it's concerning. It's extremely concerning. Is there a way out? I'm going to say yes. I think there is, but it's going to take a lot of hard work and focus and discipline. And I think they know that, right? I think to quote Mobb Deep, and I saw you recently with your Mobb Deep t-shirt on.
Queens originally, man. I represent the Queens.
They shook ones right now, right?
Well said.
Said. They don't really know what to expect, and that's the scary part, man. This is unprecedented, and so they don't know what to expect. And when you're in a situation that they're in, it makes you risk averse, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times, to really achieve the things that you want to achieve in life, particularly from a career standpoint, from a financial standpoint, you and I both know as entrepreneurs, you're only as successful as the amount of risk you're willing to take. And all of these setbacks has really created this mindset of being risk averse. I mean, the data shows that millennials, of the generations that are coexisting right now across millennials and Gen Z and baby boomers and Xers and even the matures above the baby boomers, that they are the generation that has cut back on their spending the most, them and Gen Z to follow. I think millennials have significantly cut back on their spending at a rate of like 42% less spending, where Xers are spending less, 36% less, and boomers are 23% less. Like boomers.
And is this recent data from in terms of what has transpired since COVID, or
this is since COVID?
Numbers?
This is since COVID. Yeah, this is recent data since COVID has kicked in. And
so do you think that that's going to be a reoccurring trend once this subsides? Do you think that level of conservatism and risk aversion is going to be something that they continue to adopt? You would think, obviously, there's going to be a level of being shell-shocked, being gun-shy, being scared that something like this is going to happen again. Is this going to preempt millennials to start to introduce more pragmatic ways of thinking, where they're going to want to engage in a financial system that they have been somewhat reluctant to engage in the past because of the previous experiences they've had coming out of the housing crisis, the fact that a lot of them are hyper liberals and Bernie supporters and kind of believe in certain socialistic principles and have this kind of appetite to disrupt everything. And they saw traditional banking or investments or things as asset allocation or investments that weren't material to the things that they want to experience right now.
I think a lot of that will manifest itself. And what I find interesting is that, considering that this generation places such a strong emphasis on collaboration, right? The collaboration generation. I think when it comes to their generational counterparts that they, in their own words, believes has messed up the world or screwed up the world, that the generation before them is handing to them. And I remember doing some research to talk about millennials, about the political process and how much or little they are engaged in the political process. A lot of what came out of that was they don't trust the leaders that are driving the institutions currently. So it didn't matter. Now, I know you referenced Bernie, and I think Bernie may be an exception to the rule, but there was a lack of trust with the leaders that are running our major institutions, financial institutions, educational institutions, healthcare, health and wellness, our public safety institutions, like whatever those major institutions are that drive a society forward. There was not a lot of trust. And you speak specifically about the financial institutions, and then also our political process. They believe that until we, a member of our generation, is at the wheel, at the helm, it almost doesn't matter who's there. I can't trust that they are going to do the right thing. They've screwed it up enough already. So until there's someone that represents our generation, I don't know that I want to participate in the process that any of these institutions has to offer. Now, I say that to say that what's surprising to me is, based on the people that are in those positions now, they have all of the experience and the expertise and the institutional knowledge of what it takes, although they may have gotten it wrong. Insert yourself in a collaborative way. It can't be a clean cut. Let's get them out, then we'll go in and take over. There needs to be a passing of the torch or the baton, so to speak, because now you're not gaining that level of knowledge and expertise, that because there's still, whether you appreciate the way that those that have come before you have run it or not, you still need information.
How do you build that trust back, True? I mean, because
information is not knowledge.
You bring a fascinating point, right? The point that that level of inherent distrust that came from the first recession, and the greater transparency and access to information that this audience has had, that has given them purview into a lot of the corruption and the political misconduct that has driven this country and this world into the current state that it's in, whether it's financially, environmentally, racially, socially. There's just a variety of things, right? That this group associates those that they're now almost dependent on in terms of salvaging or help to salvage their current situation. How do you repair that trust and create a dialogue that ultimately results in millennials re-engaging an audience to get the information they need to improve their current situation?
I think they're starting that now with identifying who those trusted and credible, right? You know, and I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and I had the revelation that there is a distinction that can and is being made between a trusted source and a credible source, right? And so you won't become a trusted source until you can show me you are a credible source that is willing to act responsibly with the power that we've given to you, right? Because from a leadership standpoint, we decide, I think a lot of people in our boomer generation, right? And I don't want to paint the entire generation with the same broad brush, but I think the purview of how leadership was approached is you take the power. But I think millennials have an understanding of, no, we will decide who we will give the power to based on who we believe is going to act responsibly with the power. And the ones that we believe will act responsibly with the power are those who are willing to share it or give it back or empower us to, you know, deliver against our best gifts and talents and contributions so that we can help them continue to build up institutions that are going to be more civic minded and purpose driven. So I think we're seeing it now with them aligning themselves with people that they consider credible information sources or partners. And then those are the ones who will gain their trust. They will transition from a credible partner to a trusted partner. And those are the institutions and organizations that they will align themselves with from a internal and external standpoint. They'll align themselves with those institutions internally. Yeah, this is the place where I want to go and show up every day and be a part of something bigger than myself to help course correct our society. And I'll also speak with my dollars. And this is the institutional organization that I will support. So I think we're going to see that in the Patagonias of the world, the Toms of the world, the Ben and Jerry's of the world, all right? Organizations like that.
Now, I mean, obviously the organizations that you spoke of have been acting with purpose since the inception of their businesses, right? How do some of the legacy corporations that are endemic to helping these consumers and helping millennials kind of get back on stable ground, who are somewhat known as being perpetuators of the problem, create the credibility that they need in order to actually engage in a meaningful discussion that is predicated upon trust?
Yeah, they're going to have to leverage their influence and their positions and their platforms of power, if you will, to really go beyond defining their success by their bottom lines and their profit margins, and really give voice to these audience, but a willingness to not only give voice to the millennials, but also a willingness to teach and educate the millennials as to how to navigate these waters to achieve success and in the manner in which it is going to be necessary to achieve success. But taking a step back and not falling on that old adage of this is how we've always done it. I think those that are in those positions currently need to really take a step back and say, okay, this is a new day, and we may need to do things differently. And this is a generation who represents our future. And they are eventually going to be the leaders that's running this world. And if we don't take the time to invest in them and educate them on how they need to navigate these waters based on the new way of doing things, the new normal, based on the new technologies that are in place, the new expectations that are in place, then we're all in trouble if we don't take the time to invest in this new generation. So I think it's a matter of taking a step back from the current leaders and looking at big picture and realizing that Yeah, we need to make money. I get it. Absolutely. But success and shouldn't be solely based upon that bottom line and that profit margin, but also based on the impact that you are able to make in the lives of those that need you most. And right now, it's millennials that need us most. And there are other marginalized groups and audiences out there that you can, like millennials from a generational standpoint, but then there are other vulnerable and marginalized communities, like the communities of color, even within that millennial generation. How are these organizations being good corporate citizens to impact the lives of those that need them most right now?
I mean, that's fascinating. And are millennials jaded? All right, because, my concern is you speak about the willingness that the corporate sector, the financial sector, the political sector, they have to start being a lot more flexible in their willingness to kind of outreach to millennials, is what I'm hearing you say, and speak to them in a way that's more authentic and credible to the way that they want to hear it. But is it a two-way street now? Do millennials, who have known historically to be an uncompromising generation with respect to the values and principles that they hold dear in terms of how they adopt new brands into their lives, do they now have to be somewhat compromising because they're forced to have to deal with institutions, legacy banking institutions, lending institutions, that they're going to have to be dependent upon to get lines of credit, to get business loans, to get the things they need to recover from this crisis? So how is that compromise going to work if you're dealing with an audience that is inherently jaded because of what they've had to go through, because they, to some degree, look at the condition they're in as a byproduct of the corruption that has been instituted by now the institutions that they are relying on in order to get back to a level playing field?
Yeah, and I'll go back to the word, to answer your question. Yes, there's going to have to be some mutual compromise across the board, right? And I'll go back to the point of encouraging our millennial counterparts, our millennial brothers and sisters, to lean on their value and their expectation and the strong attribute of collaboration that they possess, and view it through that lens. It is going to require a collaborative effort. And so it is going to have to be a two-way street, right? And I'll say this, one of my favorite quotes: methods are many, principles are few. Methods always change, but principles never do. So to our millennials out there listening to this, you don't have to change stay principled, maintain the integrity of the principles that you have, but understand that the method and approach that you take will have to change. And another way that I say when I talk to millennials directly is like, look, never give up on the dream, but you may have to change the approach. And so they are, I believe, you said outreach, and it's interesting. And if I can for a second revisit that word and make a clear distinction between outreach and engagement. You said, are these organizations, these corporate leaders, these institutions, whether it be financial, law enforcement, government, what have you, are they going to have to do a better job of outreach to this generation? Outreach in one aspect, absolutely. But outreach is something that you do for someone. And that comes with an air of arrogance because you feel like you're doing this for someone. And that gives you the sense of maintaining that level of control and authority, like they need me. I think it's a combination of outreach and engagement, because outreach is something you do for someone, but engagement is something that you do with someone. And I think it needs to be a combination of outreach and engagement, because it won't work if one party, being the boomers, feels as though it's something they have to do for the next generation. I think the only way we're going to see this thing turn around and allow us to be ushered back to a generational high for all people involved is if it's something that the millennials and the boomers do with one another. And that's the engagement piece.
So you spoke a little bit about the importance of principles. I mean, the one thing that why I've been so enamored with millennials, and to some degree in awe of them, despite a lot of the idiosyncrasies that people complain about. And look, I'm an employer. I have millennial, employees that sometimes, I don't understand, and they get on my last nerve.
Right.
But the one thing that I do respect about millennials is their principled behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why my namesake of my company, the namesake of the show, is called Hero, is because it's an ode to the hero generation, or millennials, who are trying to usher in this new, era of conscious capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my concern now is that this purpose-driven community, who is now faced with the second economic crisis in their lifetime, and in a lifetime where they're actually experiencing it. It wasn't like the first one was when they were just infants. Like they are experiencing it during a part of their maturation cycle where it was about getting a job. Now a lot of them are starting families. Millennials are 40 now. They have, there's 20 million babies that millennials have had in America now. So they are nesting, and they need to start becoming more pragmatic. Is this current situation, or this current pandemic, now going to take this principled, conscious-driven, purpose-driven generation, and are we going to see an attrition in that behavior in exchange for pragmatism, in exchange for being more conservative, and focusing more on survival and self-interest, versus being an audience that derived a level of self-value from the service that they implemented and the service they offered to others, because that was a form of self-worth they used to replace material wealth and the assets that they weren't able to accumulate. Are we going to see a deterioration in purpose as a result of this?
That's a great question, Joe. And my response to that is I hope not. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to put to the test really the resiliency and the grit of this generation, having gone through these traumatic experiences, these crises, these the recessions that they've gone through. It's really going to test the resiliency and the grit of this generation. And it's also going to test the cycle from a historical standpoint of generational turns. And you just referenced the millennial generation being the hero generation. Mm-hmm. This is the generation based on history, right? Mm-hmm. And these generational turns has been something that's been studied and documented that has been occurring since the late 1500s. Mm-hmm. Is that a generational turn is 4 different cycles that takes place. There's a generational high, there is a generational awakening, there's a generational unraveling, and then there's a generational crisis. And bro, let me tell you, I'll give you one guess which turn or which cycle we are in this generational turn.
It sure ain't the high. It sure ain't the high. No, man.
And each generational archetype is then formed based upon the societal conditions of those cycles that is responsible for ushering us into that next turn. And millennials are the generation, AKA the hero generation, as they have been dubbed by you and others, to usher us back to a generational high. So it's going to put that theory to the test while it's putting their resiliency and their grit to the test to see if, in fact, they will take their place in history, and will they cower because of the crisis that they've gone through and become extremely gun shy and not take the necessary action that it requires to usher us to a generational high? Or will they step up and step forward and double down on living by the principles that they have established themselves as the champions of?
Well, let's hope it's the latter, my brother. Let's hope it's the latter, because we need them to be our champions, and we need them to maintain a high level of optimism in the wake of this storm and this crisis and this unprecedented, experience that we're all going through right now. We need them to be the champions and to keep our political structure honest, to continue to be transparent and champions for change. So let's hope that is the road that they go down.
Well, I'm pulling for them.
I am too, my brother. You know, I have a 14-year-old son. You have a young son,
a 7-year-old son. Yeah.
Yeah, these individuals are going to pave the way for their futures as well. So we need them to your earlier point. We need this generation to be healthy, to be financially healthy, to be mentally strong, and to be steadfast in their commitment to driving change on an exponential level that protects our planet, protects the lives of our children and the generations to come. Now, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the future, right? In terms of how you think in the short term, millennials' lifestyles will change as a result of this. Now, we've already seen millennials with a stronger predisposition for cohabitation, for living in big cities, for finding ways to leverage networked economy principles, to allow them the flexibility to live lifestyles that, give them access to certain things that they would normally be able to afford on their own. Now with this new way of working remotely, obviously with them, experiencing the cash crunch, the level of unemployment, are we going to see exoduses from the cities in exchange for more of a suburban life where they can manage costs better and raise a family without worrying about, going to the store and running out of toilet paper if things, go bad, I mean, what fundamental lifestyle changes are we going to see in the short term as a byproduct of this pandemic?
I think in the short term, you talked about families and raising families, right? I think in the short term, we're going to see a decline in family formation and growth. Because again, from a historical context, you typically see a boost and a boom in family formation and growth during times of optimism, where people feel good about bringing new life into the world in which we live. That is not the overall feeling right now with this generation. So I think we're going to see a decline on family formation and family growth. I think we're going to see a decline in needs, purchasing wants versus needs. So not a decline in needs, actually a decline in wants and an incline in focusing on purchases that are practical and things that we need. So I personally think the luxury industry should prepare for that and be willing to know that they're going to take a hit. So, because if you are people that are less fortified to deal with the consequences of misplaced trust and financial investments, are less inclined to take those actions. And this generation doesn't feel very fortified right now, financially or otherwise. And so I think they're going to be, in the short term, more inclined to be very selective about where they spend their dollars, and be very hesitant to bring new life into this world. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to, I think those are some of the things that will impact millennials in the short term. I don't know that it will be, I think it will, even in long term, I don't think it will stay that way. But I think one thing that we already know about millennials that will continue to ring true is focusing more on experiences than things. So I think we'll see a shift and a new definition of how luxury is defined.
Interesting. And so my last question, brother, man, and this really kind of is asked through the lens of you as a life coach, as an individual who works with a lot of young people and gives them really meaningful advice. What are some tips? What is some advice that you would give millennials who are watching this right now on how to improve their current situation in the short term? What can they do? I mean, so many of them right now, their minds are spinning. They feel lost. They're angry. They're upset. They don't know where to turn. People are getting desperate. What advice do you give that person right now who is literally on the edge of living on the edge of uncertainty and what could they do to better their position in the short term?
From a life coach, and that's a great question, and I hope that a lot of people get a chance to hear this, because I've been sharing this counsel with a lot of people. And from a life coach perspective, I would say invest your time and energy in areas where you can serve others that will help improve the quality of their life. We all have the ability to do that at some level and at some capacity. And as counterintuitive as that may sound, if you believe that you are at a low, or if you are struggling, or if you are confused, when you take the time to pour into someone else, it actually helps you. It brings you up. It elevates you up. And your efforts and energies in helping someone else, leveraging whatever gifts you have, whatever passions you have, to use that to serve someone else, that actually elevates you and lifts you up and gives you a level of awareness about the value that you actually bring. And then you begin to feel good about yourself.
Wow, it's almost finding your salvation through service.
Absolutely.
Which to your point, it is counterintuitive right now, as everyone is turning inward. Don't do that. Turn outward and understand that our people that are suffering even more. Use the best gifts that you've been given as being this selfless generation, and continue not to change is what I've gotten from you right now. Like, be true to who you are and continue to serve humanity in a way, and you're going to get your just reward and find new pathways that could potentially result in new opportunities.
Man, when you're living on, and this is the generation that is all about purpose. So I would encourage them to continue to focus on their purpose, because purpose opens up doors that you never even knew existed. Purpose will open up doors and create opportunities that your talent can't create. Purpose will create opportunities and open up doors that your degree never could. Purpose will create opportunities and open up doors that you never even knew existed. So stay consistent and persistent with pursuing and delivering on purpose and how you can serve others. And look, the saying goes, you reap what you sow. We've all heard that, right? So, somehow in our society, it's taken on a negative connotation, right? You know, when something bad happened to you, people will be like, see, that's what you get. You reap what you sow. But no, it's not intended to be a negative. It's a positive, right? But what I want this generation to understand, yes, you do reap what you sow. So if you are sowing good into others, good will come back to you. But it's not just that you reap what you sow. Just keep in mind that you also only reap when you sow. So you can't expect to reap anything if you're not sowing into anything or anyone.
My brother, as always, my conversations with you are always thought-provoking and fascinating. I'm Joe Anthony. This is True Pettigrew. He's definitely a hero. Until next time, remember, you don't have to be superhuman to be a superhero. Get out there, make a difference. Small things do matter. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time. Peace.